Well, welcome everyone. Isn't it a beautiful place? This is a fantastic place, and we are so grateful for the wonderful people and educators in VR and Mark who have put this together, this special place. It sort of feels cozy, and there's a lot of class to it. And just look at all the books around us. I mean, there are just gazillions of virtual worlds in these books in our imagination. And so this is why we want to meet in a place like this, because sort of all this knowledge and inspiration sort of oozes out of the walls of this building, of this room. So welcome to our first proper fireside chat for the Virtual World Society. We did have one 2 weeks ago, but that one was actually sponsored by and hosted by educators in VR. Why don't you go to the next slide, Mark? Pat, why don't you do that for us? So we want to thank our partners, educators in VR, especially Daniel and Laurel and Donna and Mark also for helping us get this all set up. Thank you guys, you're wonderful. And we love you. We want to launch this proper event by looking at the VR Manifesto. Now, as you may recall, those of you who went to the summit, the Educators in VR Summit, I talked about this manifesto that I felt that we needed to put down, sort of a stake in the ground of where we stand on this whole use of VR for goodness and for humanitarian applications. But it is a work in progress, and this is something that has evolved over a period of time in our thinking, and certainly is not completed, but we're going to want you to give us some feedback on this. We're only going to address the first few parts of that manifesto, but it is going to continue, and so we're going to have these firesides every 2 weeks to begin with. And we'll be going through the manifesto as well as other things that are coming up, as you'll see. Next slide. So let's just start with what we really want VR to do. Really, it's a tool. We build tools, right? And we build tools to help give us power, to empower us to do things we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So we certainly want them to teach us. That's sort of our connection with educators in VR. We want them to heal us. We want them to lift us, power us, and connect us, as is happening today. So those are a few of the things we want VR to do. I'm sure there's a longer list than this, but that's what we want. Next slide. Now, what we don't want VR to do is hurt us, or make us sick, or make us numb to the things that really count with respecting life, or to make us afraid. So the problem is the VR can do both of these, the things we want them to do and the things we don't want them VR to do. Next slide. So that gets us really to the number one item in the manifesto. We have to realize that we are playing with fire. And in the process of putting our heads through this screen and now becoming a part of the world that's been computer generated, something happens. We're taking the three-dimensional capability that we have in the real world, and we're taking it into the virtual world. Now that means that we really are playing with fire. We're unleashing an enormous amount of energy and power. It's like splitting the atom. You've probably heard me talk about that before. And so here we have a fire to my side. That's why we call it a fireside. And that fire can certainly warm us, cook our food, and help us accomplish things in the world. But it also can burn us. And there's a duality in virtual reality that we need to be aware of and respect and use effectively. So we are playing with fire, and that's an important realization. Next slide. So what is virtual reality? Well, there's so many definitions now for this, but fundamentally, it really has a duality. It's what it is and what it does. What it is a medium that acts as a transportation system for our senses. But that medium is only a delivery mechanism for the message. And the message is the place where we go. Now, when we combine this delivery mechanism with the message, the place, we get an unprecedented and boundless experience. And we don't even have a clue yet today where it's going to take us, the worlds it's going to take us to. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is go through this medium and message. And by the way, you don't have to pay any attention to the slides. These are mainly as cues for me. They're my notes, so I won't forget something. And you can access these slides in our website. We'll have those available for you. But what I'm going to do is go through these issues about the medium and about the message, and I'm sort of going to give a grade for these things. Now, you may not agree with the grade I give, but I'm going to try to go through this as fast as I can and tell you what's going on. Okay, first of all, the medium has to match our sensory capability. We have to have a good impedance match between the way we perceive the world and the way we interact with that world. So we have different modalities, the visual modality, audition, hearing, the tactile or touch, and haptics, force feedback, smell, and taste. Now, how are we doing today with all of those things? Well, you think we're doing okay with the visual, but we're not. We're not even close. I give ourselves a grade of C- because our displays are still pixelated, and we aren't even taking into account the way the eyes work in terms of our, basically our cues, our vergence cues and our depth cues. Audition, I give us a B. We're coming along pretty well with binaural sound. We're coming along with some pretty good things with removing static and things like that. And so with binaural sound, we can create this three-dimensional sound. Now, we may not be using it effectively in VR yet, but it's coming along. The technology is there with the digital signal processing. Tactile and haptics, we have a long way to go to be able to feel things and to touch things and get the force feedback. So a lot of work needs to be done there. A lot of good PhDs and companies can come along to do the tactile. We are beginning to see the emergence of some good stuff, but we still have a way to go. Olfactory, smell, yeah, there's some things out there that are beginning to happen with olfactory. Matter of fact, we understand the eigenvalues of smell. We know that we can make 7 or 9 different combinations of chemicals, put them together, and we can get just about all the smell. But some of those require reactions that are difficult to manage. And then taste, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to taste the virtual meal, probably someday, but that we aren't really doing much in at all. Okay, next slide. So that's matching the sensory side of things. So what about the psychomotor side of things, the way we interact with the world? And I'm sort of boil those down to movement and speech. Well, movement we're doing pretty well in. I give us a B-. We're able to track our hand position in 6 degrees of freedom. We're able to track our head position at 6 degrees in all parts of our body if we want to. And so we can track our fingers, and we can track our eyes. So in general, we're doing pretty well there, but still there's much room for improvement, especially eye tracking. Now, in speech, we're also doing fairly well. Speech recognition, in natural language, we have Alexis and we have Siri. Some people will say, well, that's not very good. I would only give it an F or a D. But things are coming along there, and we understand what needs to be done. Let's move on to the next one. In terms of the ergonomics, the form and fit side of things. We're not doing that well. I'm wearing a Quest right now, and the Quest is, it's the nice thing about it is untethered, but it's also front heavy, and it doesn't fit that well. And it's difficult to make the adjustments, and I feel this weight on my nose right now and bending my head forward. So I give us a C on that. Next slide. It sort of gets into this a little more. Some of the psychological side of things for the medium. Our sense of presence. Yes, we're getting a sense of presence in this, but it is not all there is. It's like playing a 76 RPM record when we've progressed to, I think, in terms of getting a sense of presence. There's so much more to our visual system than we're using. Sensory immersion, we're not even getting to our peripheral retina that would help us give this sense of place and sense of being in a virtual place as much as we can. Motion sickness, we're learning what causes motion sickness. And we're able to make corrections of that. As a matter of fact, when you move around in alt space, if you notice when you're translating, there's a sort of a narrowing of your visual attention. The reason for that is to keep from stimulating your peripheral retina, because you would have a conflict between your visual and vestibular cues, and that would cause you to get sick. So that's one way to compensate for it. You get this tunneling to keep from stimulating the peripheral retina while you're moving. Fatigue, well, people thought that, well, when we have a collimated display, and the picture's out there, we're up close and to that scene, that would be something that was really more relaxing. Well, that's not really happening in terms of fatigue, especially when it comes to wearing a heavy weight on your head. And longitudinal effects, we don't have a clue. By that, I mean, what happens after you use VR year after year after year? We don't know. As a matter of fact, most people, may spend a few hours a day in VR. We don't know what happens when you do that for years and years. So we need to do these kinds of studies. That's what we need to have for this medium to accomplish what we want it to accomplish. Okay, next slide. So if we summarize all these things, we come up with these what I call key areas of concern for the medium. Certainly the weight and balance of the headgear. The balance is actually more important than the weight. If you get the balance along the longitudinal axis of the head, vertical axis of the head, so that weight is distributed, you don't have this front loading that pushes down in front of your head. Anytime you build a cantilever beam with that mass that shifts the center of gravity of the head, you're going to have to cause some muscles in the neck to be strained because of it. So we want to keep that as close as we can to the top. So we should be distributing the batteries and other things, electronics around the head, even though that does increase the inertial, the momentum when you're moving your head around, rotational momentum. Display collimation. Okay, what we're looking at now, those of you who are in VR, these images are collimated to optical infinity, even though the objects you're trying to look at are not at optical infinity. That means that you're causing the eyes to look in a place that they wouldn't look normally at a three-dimensional image. And this has to do with this third thing, the conflict of vergence and accommodation. Accommodation is the distance that your eyes focus independently. Vergence is your binocular cues. These two need to match. Well, they're not. They're not matching in any of the VR systems today. Some of the AR systems are trying to do this, but they aren't even close. And this can cause problems in vision. There's this whole problem of adjusting interpupillary distance. If you have a stereo headset, you've got to get that right. You need to know what your interpupillary distance is. If it means having your friend or your wife or spouse, companion, whoever, take a little measuring stick and measure the separation of your eyes, and then you dial those into your headset. Now, of course, if you're using a Google Cardboard or something like that, you can't do that. It doesn't adjust interpupillary distance. That is so important for you to have that correct, because otherwise everything is off, and you will create fatigue and eye strain with that. We also have this whole notion of cables. Cables really get in the way. You trip over them and things like that. But if you do away with the cable, you have to put the batteries there. So batteries increase the weight. And so there's this trade-off of how do we use batteries versus cables and wireless and all those kinds of things. And then finally, cost. That's an area of concern, how much it costs to get into VR. Now, if you have a cell phone, of course, you can get into it really fast. A smartphone, just shove it in a cardboard. But that's not very good because the capability really isn't there that you get in the higher end devices. So we got to get the cost down and substantially down. And I think we can. We see what's happening with the Quest and with the Go and with the Vive Focus. This is all coming down. We'll see that improvement. Next slide. All right, let's turn to the message. What do we want the message to do? Well, I've sort of listed that. We want it to do all these things, engaging and enlightening and entertaining and empowering us, teaching us, healing us, connecting us, so forth. But we don't want it to do any harm. So you see the grade I gave us there. We're still at an F because the messages do not universally with us and edify us and engender well-being and empathy, and they don't protect us. Next slide. So these are my areas of concern for the message. We don't really have the tools yet to develop content for VR, in 3D. We're trying to generate 3D content using 2D tools, CAD tools, basically. That's not very efficient. And there's some tools coming along where you can do some block defining in a VR and VR, but we need to really work on that. We need to have the Maya and the Unity of VR that blends together so we can create these marvelous virtual worlds and importing content from the real world into that. We need a community of all these wonderful independent developers to build the kind of content that does lift us. And we're trying to do that. And you'll hear later on in another Fireside about that activity from Eva and We Make Reality. The Virtual World Society is trying to do that. Certainly, I have concern about the quality of content in terms of the goodness of it and also the quantity of VR content. Let's face it, we don't really have much content out there yet. And so in order to get these improvements, there needs to be an install base. And in order to get an install base, you have to have something you can do with it. You need to have places to go. And if you don't have the places to go, then it's like buying a wonderful big screen TV, HD TV, 4K TV, without having any programming. So we got to figure out how to get more quantity of good content into that. And then there's the cost of the content. People need to make money when they create this content, but the reason it costs so much is because the tools that we're using, it's really difficult to make it. The storytellers and the content makers, the creative side of the message, which is where that is, they are going to inherit the earth and the VR earth in the end. Because all of the tool makers are just trying to build that medium so that the message can be delivered. So we've got to figure out how to do that more efficiently and effectively. But then my last concern is the suitability of VR content. We got to get away from killing as a form of entertainment, of practicing killing to entertain ourselves. Next slide. And that really gets us to this whole area of we can't do harm. We have this great power, we can't harm. Now, what are the guidelines for helping all of this? Well, we've got to get your IPD adjusted so you at least have that working. You have to be careful using cardboard type devices. Remember that doesn't get your IPD. Some of them do, but it's still not that good in terms of its match with your sensory capabilities. Need to minimize our time in VR and go outside and walk around. And as you'll see later on, hug some trees and some people, real people. and it's we can do a lot of this connecting in VR, but it's only part of the story. And Mother Nature's already provided amazing worlds for us to engage with. Obviously, you have to be careful what you're doing in VR and where you're moving around, because I have a great fear that you hit something, fall over something, trip over something, get a fracture, and you get enough of those things, and it's a showstopper. Because VR is going to be truly labeled as dangerous. And people will say, don't go there because it's like smoking and you get cancer. You don't want to mess with VR because it's going to hurt you. Next slide. Another thing is to understand that when a person is in VR, they're in a sacred space, in their own space. And you can't violate that unless you are invited to violate it. Don't ever touch another person when they're in VR, because what that will do is make them afraid to go into VR, because it surprises them in many cases. You need to clean your headsets, especially this day and age. You know, when headsets are being passed around from student to student or person to person and shows, clean it the best way you can. Eva has some stories about that, of what happened with unclean headsets. We don't want to hurt anybody. Don't use apps that cause a conflict of visual and vestibular cues. These are apps where you're moving with full field of view in the virtual world, but you're not moving in the physical world. So that causes this conflict of being visual and vestibular cues. And ones that are famous for that are roller coaster rides and driving simulators. And especially the first visit that a person has into VR, you don't want to put them on a roller coaster, because it could be they'll never go there again. And finally, as I mentioned before, do not practice killing in VR. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. Number 3 is in our manifesto is to shun violence in any form. Look at this, blowing people apart. Now, what does that teach us? Because what happens is that it makes us numb to killing and seeing this kind of thing. This should be abhorrent to us rather than celebrating it and using it as a tool to entertain. Number 3 is shun violence in any form. Next slide. So I'm proposing sort of a call to action. This is your organization, the Virtual World Society. We are a family, and we're here to try to do good and to take this marvelous tool and take it in directions that are going to lift mankind. So here are some things that I'm, as part of the first 3 manifesto things, that I wanted to propose that we think about. One is to create an anonymous repository of adverse use experiences in VR and AR. It is amazing how many people are approaching me now with problems they're having. They're getting sick. They're getting eye injuries, eye strain. The doctors I've talked to who treat this say, I can't believe it. I'm getting so many people in who complain about their eyes hurting because of being in VR, and it takes a while to get them fixed because we're disrupting the normal control mechanisms of the visual system. So we need to know that. The industry doesn't know it. I mean, they get anecdotal evidence, but we need a proper repository that's anonymous of people talking about experiences they've had that are not good. Number two is that we need to have an objective watchdog activity to assess the quality of not only the hardware, but the content. And this is sort of like a good housekeeping seal of approval. I don't know if that exists anymore, but it used to when I was growing up. When you had a good housekeeping seal of approval, that meant that you had good people that were actually reviewing things. And so this is sort of like a rating system, but it's a rating system not intended to give industry a hard time. It's intended to guide them and help them to know what to do, because we depend upon the industry to provide us this technology that we need. And then we need to also industry and government to encourage funding for the longitudinal studies we need. These probably be done in universities, through universities, but we don't want companies to do these things. Just like you don't want the tobacco company to do longitudinal studies of the effects of tobacco. We want to encourage that kind of funding and get that kind of activity underway. Now, it's interesting that the Virtual World Society is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're also listed as a government, we're able to apply for government funding to do this. And if we have a groundswell of interest of our membership, our combined membership of educators in VR and the Virtual World Society, then we can get the attention and get the funding we need for these longer term studies. Now, at this point, what I'd like to do is sort of open it up to you for some questions. We'll come back in a few minutes. I think that's the next slide. Next slide, Matt. Yeah, I'd like to get some of your observations that you've had in VR. Who's going to be managing our answering the questions, asking the questions? If you're raising your hand, you can. Let's see. We didn't organize that.
So, Eva, do you want me to handle it, or do you want to?
I got this.
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
Be sure to go in the
they
megaphone.
have to hit the raise hand button.
Okay. Yes. So if you have, oops, I have my mic on. Yes. If you have a question, go ahead and click the raise hand button.
Or a comment.
Or comment.
Observation.
Anybody? Gotta be someone out there. I don't know if I can see. How do I see that stuff? Host tools.
Oh, here's a hand.
Okay.
Okay, so it's under. So I have a question, and while you're looking, it's under host tools, and then under participation. Okay. So Tom, number one, thank you for the thanks. So this is Laurel from Educators in VR.
Right.
Thank you so much. Your vision of the past and the vision of the future is absolutely extraordinary. And here we are. We had your birthday just a couple of weeks ago. What it was right here in Altspace, which was amazing. So here we are in this social space. Can you talk about the social aspect of VR?
Well, certainly this is an area that we're in new territory. We don't really understand completely what should be the moral and ethical side of being in this social space when we need to apply some set of rules in that, the proper behavior in that, and those haven't been well defined yet, except the one I mentioned is don't touch anybody in the real space if they're in the virtual world at the same time. So one of the things I've enjoyed so far in VR is being social, and especially these spontaneous things, these emergent things that happen when we're able to gather in a small circle and talk about and meet people that we never would have met otherwise from around the world. And so this is also a sacred space where we're in together with this. And we need to treat our avatar bodies as if they are real bodies, and appreciate that there is actually a soul underneath there. There is a heart there and a mind and intelligence, and to respect that. And robot eyes and blinking eyes and seeing those lips move. It'll get better, better, and better. But that's the other thing, is to appreciate that this is really a person, and to have our interaction with that person as if we're there physically. In that way, VR becomes really powerful, because now we have a place where we can go, where we don't have to burn up all the fossil fuels of the earth to get there, and do it instantly. And so I believe that we're going to discover through this emergent behavior things that we can do together, things of how we can touch each other with some magic of things. For example, I was at a buddy's late night interview session. And while I was there listening to the buddy interview, Erica comes up next. I met 2 months ago. And Erica says, "Tom, I have a few minutes. I'd like to show you something." I said, "Sure." She a portal for me to go to a world that she had built. And in this world was we were in this field of stark field. It was in the mountains in the background. See the stars in the sky. And then the Blue Danube Waltz started playing. And then fireworks started going on. These fireworks, I mean, it's the most amazing fireworks display I've ever seen. And it was in time with the music. And the fireworks, you'd hear the sounds, fireworks go up and burst, and they burst into flowers, into butterflies, and all to the music, intertwined and all that. It was amazing. And the nearest tells that she created that for the new year. And then the last burst was 2020. And so, how do you do that in the real world? I mean, it was magic moment. I looked over at Nira and saw Nira looking up at the sky at the burst of the fireworks, flashing on her face. And I realized, wow, I was actually beholding an amazing person, a creative person that had done this and was sharing it with me. Now, that's just one example. Back to the social thing that you asked a few minutes ago, Lorella. We're just beginning to find out these things and what we can do. And so that's another reason why we need to be watching this and having and being respectful for it, and maintaining our good character with those others. So, enough said on that, I guess.
Okay, awesome. VR girl, you had a question. I'll go ahead and unmute you. So you have the megaphone. All right. Is VR girl in the room?
I'm right here. I
Awesome.
have an observation. I was so glad to hear you say about killing shouldn't be entertaining, because that's always been something I always avoid it when I pick VR games, because I don't like the idea of hurting virtual beings as well as real beings. So I thought it was just me being quirky or being a pacifist or whatever. So it's so nice to hear someone else to say the same thing. And I
You guys agree with that? If you agree with that, what Virtual Girl is saying? Yeah. So you're with friends who share the same values about
that's
that.
good to hear.
So where are you from, Virtual Girl?
I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, in the USA.
Okay, good on you.
Mhm.
That's great.
And
Okay.
then, thank you, VR girl. Awesome. We got Snowbun. Snowbun, I'm gonna give you the megaphone. I think Snowbun wanted to comment on the violence part, Tom. All right, you got the megaphone. Snowbun. If they say it. Oh. Right here, right in the front. Snow Bunny. That's what I meant, sorry.
Snow Bunny.
Snow Bunny, you got the megaphone? Are you able to speak? I'll give it to you again. All right, now try again. Maybe is your mic connected?
Doesn't always work.
Oh, okay, really? Let me
Yeah,
try one more
sometimes
time.
yeah.
Oh, it's awaiting consent is what it says. All right, let's try one more time. The blue megaphone button is lit up, so hopefully.
Could
All
be
right,
her end.
well, yeah, we can come back to you maybe if it works down the road. So I'll move on. All right, we got Christina had a question. I'm gonna put you on megaphone if you're ready. Cool. And there's awaiting consent again.
Does it work like that?
There we go. Now we hear you. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, I just want to first of all thank you for a great talk and for making an effort of actually raising and discussing all of this in VR, which is lovely. I really appreciate it. And just to, because of the whole situation going on, I think we should also discuss the hygiene in regarding the headsets. You mentioned there are some stories already. I bet that they are going to be more and more, but given the situation, a lot of people who are interested in promoting VR, because for example, for the industry, it's also kind of interesting. Like there are a lot of products, but they're not enough user base. And in terms of bringing up VR and making it set not just as entertainment games tool, but more like a serious medium. We have to bring it to the industries that do not work with VR from the beginning, and now I see that, for example, this year is going to be super problematic in terms of hygiene considerations and sharing, getting the attendees, and then kind of using them and so on and so forth. So can we discuss that if that's okay?
Well, is there a specific question that you have about it?
Well, what is your take on the hygiene? What are your recommendations,
okay.
especially
Okay.
given the current situation?
Yes.
And how can we promote VR for serious use, for good, and address the current situation in a better way? Because I think a lot of people in the community are actually lost on, if it's not the private use device, what do we do?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question, actually. Certainly if you have one device that you're sharing across several people, that you would do, maybe even if you're in a family, or if you're in a classroom, or even at conferences and things like that. Of course, we can't do that now, but in the future, when we are back physically in the conferences and showing off our different worlds and technology, it is crucial for us to disinfect the headset because it's up close and personal, isn't it? It's touching another individual, and they're perspiring on it and into it and things like that. So we need to have some new technology that actually does this disinfectant. And some of the UV technologies, the UVC, seem to be really good in helping that, but that doesn't get into all the places. And even swabs, using disinfectant swabs, don't get into all the places. So we need a way to actually, after we've used it, put it into a little chamber and have all of these things going on, especially probably fumigating it with a burst to kill anything that's going to be a microbe that would infect people. Now, In day-to-day use, of course, you want to keep yours clean as well, because you don't want to have all kinds of crud building up on it, and cleaning your optics and cleaning your the parts that touch your face and things like that, and that's good. So that's sort of the hygiene side of things. But it is an advantage, of course, having VR to connect like we are here, because if we were physically gathered, there'd be a lot more propensity for an exchange of microbes than the way we are now. And so in the future, I think we can see a way more use of VR in these international conferences and these firesides and things like that. And this will now become the trend, and the quality will be getting better and better and better. Now, the whole bottom line of getting the quality is the install base, that you really need to have a pull to those people, and that pull, the pull to the push people. The push people are the technology manufacturers. The pull people are the people who are going to use it, and there needs to be a growing number of the pull side in order to get the manufacturers to pay attention. And there needs to be competition. We want to have, lots of different suppliers out there competing with each other, as we do with cell phones, as we do with automobiles, we want to have competition. Competition is good, because what that does is improve the quality of everything for everyone, regardless of what your choice is. Whether you use a Mac or a PC or whatever, that competition is always good. So the install base in the long term is critical. And we get to the install base by all this chicken and egg business of getting content. And we need to get that good content there that people are saying, wow, this is wondrous. Why didn't I know about this before? I'm never going to leave it. So, that's what we have to do. So thanks for that question, Stina.
If you don't mind me adding, from the hygiene part, I'm testing now a silicone cover for the facial interface of the Quest. And I think I can recommend this. I've been using VR for quite some time in different headsets with different paddings and the VR covers and all this. So the silicone part is great because you can take it off easily and on. Again, it doesn't soak anything. Absolutely, it feels good on the skin. And actually, for the disinfection part, because you can actually boil it. So it's kind of a cheap disinfection side. But the problem is that inside the HMD, like the nose area, which is partially covered by it, it actually does a great job. It recreates the HTC Vive. I don't know what you call this. This plastic that blocks your vision in the nose area.
Yes.
So it does a great job. So you're also partially covered there, but the rest, for example, with the Quest, the fabric is a problem. So I'm not sure what to do about that one, but I could recommend the silicone thing. It's pretty good and a lot cheaper than the VR cover, I must say.
You should mention those things in the Discord channels. Discord channels for the Virtual World Society and for the educators in VR, so that you can get the word out that way. That's one good way to do it. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
thanks.
Okay, will do.
Okay, back to you, Eva.
Okay. Let's see who's next. Sorry, my menu's in the chair, so trying to find it. All right, we got Rosie Fred. If you still have your question, can you emoji? No, I see you. Okay, you're gonna get the megaphone right now. Just awaiting consent. Awesome. All right, Rosie, it's all you.
Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to wonder if you had any thoughts on VR and healthcare. Your point earlier about doing conferences in VR was really interesting. I actually met a couple of people who are here today. Valentino, standing right in front of me, and Jessica, who's somewhere in the room. There she is. Both of them, Jessica actually was part of my research today, and I met both of these people at a VR conference on healthcare a few weeks ago. we were meant to be doing a conference in LA, but obviously we couldn't do it recently because of the COVID crisis. So we ended up doing a virtual conference talking about VR and healthcare. And I'm aware there's so many amazing people doing things that are so positive right now. It's so lovely to hear people talking about this, all the stuff you talked about with, you know, not killing and not doing those kind of the worst of humanity when we're in a position to, you know, use VR for such a positive purpose. So it's just, I wondered what your thoughts were on using VR in healthcare settings, mental health and physical health.
Well, wonderful, wonderful question. And of course, we could go on for hours about that, that whole topic. We have the VR community is beginning to explore do this. Certainly, this can be done for use for training, for simulation training, things like that. For training surgeons, training people, ENT people. We just built a sinus surgery simulator and a TURP, transurethral resection of the prostate simulator. And you certainly, those guys of you out there, when you get to be old, this is something you definitely want those urologists to train on before they do it on you. And so training is amazing. What can be done to train medical students, to train surgeons, and even to certify surgeons. The whole area of diagnostics, using the technology to diagnose, especially dementia and other problems having to do with MS and muscular dystrophy and all these kinds of things, because we can measure dynamically tremor and movement capability. Physical therapy, another big thing. You can have the remote physical therapist come in and inhabit your body and show you what to do, how to move your limb, and actually give you a score of how you're doing every day without having you physically and painfully go to a physical therapist clinic. We have this whole area of pain, where we know that VR is a non-pharmaceutical analgesic for pain. So I mean, it just goes on and on. Treating dementia, treating rheumatoid arthritis, all of these kinds of things. In the UK, actually, I proposed to the National Health Service building what we call a holobed. A holobed is a bed that basically puts you in a virtual world, and where you are actually in a meadow, and you smell things, and you hear things. You hear the birds and the brook, and your friends can come in there to visit with you, and we see that as also monitoring everything that's going on and actually changing the environment depending on what state you're in. Reducing stress. We know stress causes cancer. Stress also, especially for breast cancer, is direct correlated with reoccurrence of breast cancer. And we can use the tools to help solve those problems. So I could sort of keep going there, but I think that the medical side, this is back to healing us, that we want VR to heal us. It is certainly a tool that we can use for that. Okay, what I'd like to do is take a break for a minute and go back to some slides, and because I have something that I want Eva to share with you. So Matt, can we go to the next slide, please? We sent out a survey to members of the Virtual World Society and educators in VR. And I'd like for Eva to sort of share with us the top level results from that. Go ahead, Eva.
Okay, first off, hello, I'm Eva. Hi, everybody. Secondly, can you guys hear me okay? Because I live in the city and they just decided to do major yard work literally right out my window. Okay, so I apologize if you hear a power, what do you call it? Pressure washer in the background. It is not my stomach growling. It is yard work day. So, yay. Cool.
By the way,
So you can hear
Eva,
me okay, right?
yeah, Eva is the director of communications of the Virtual World Society. I forgot to mention that, Eva. She's our esteemed. Oh, you can stand anywhere there.
I'm trying to figure out what to do with this chair. I don't know. I'm just gonna stand over here. All right, this is more comfortable. All right. Hello. Yeah, as Tom said, we sent out a survey a few weeks back. Give me some hearts if you were one of the people that filled out that survey. All right. Got some hearts in the back. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so we sent it out because it's a weird time, right? And I really wanted to get a sense of how the VR community is feeling and how they're doing during quarantine, how the pandemic is affecting you, how we can help you in the next few months. So thank you to those who filled it out. I'm not going to take too much time, but I just wanted to go over the key findings that I gathered, the common responses that I gathered, and I'm going to share those. And if any of the following points that I bring up resonate with you, if you can relate to it, if you feel it too, give me some hearts. So the first one was that projects are being postponed or canceled or funding is running out. Give me some hearts if that's something you're experiencing. Yeah. Yep, that is a very unfortunately common thing that's happening right now for a lot of people. That was one of the biggest ones that I found. The next one is we're unable to meet face to face, so we can't do VR demos face to face, which makes it harder to share our creations with the people we want to share with. A few of you noted that you work in colleges and you're trying to get VR adopted in these colleges, but since you can't share it in person and since no one has the hardware at home, that process has become a bit slower. So I saw some hearts go up. It feels like overall that's a problem that is very hard to solve right now, but hopefully we can find some alternatives. The next one is that a lot of you, because we shared this with the educators in the VR community as well, a lot of you are educators and your students don't have access to hardware, to VR hardware or high-end PCs that can run these applications. I mean, even some of us, our friends don't have access to that hardware. So especially for students, it's how do we get them engaged with the VR matter that we were teaching them before, now that they don't have that access. So that was a big one. And then beyond the logistical situation that we have here where we can't leave our homes and be with each other, there's also the stress and the isolation and the anxiety that comes from this scary time. So if you feel that, give me some hearts because I feel it. It's a weird time and you know, that can affect, people commented that that's been affecting their work ethic, which is totally understandable. You know, now we're at home, a lot of people have families, and so it's hard to stay focused. So yeah, those were the big ones. And so while we can't really control what's going on in the world right now, and it often feels like we have very little control, at least we have this, right? We have this really cool space where we can gather and hopefully, you know, in the coming months, we can continue to gather and hang out and get to know each other and just try to make the best out of the situation. And, you know, you never know if your story or your ideas or your experience can inspire someone right now. And I don't know about y'all, but I need some inspiration. I'm alone. I live alone in an apartment in the city. So it feels like there's people around me, but I also feel like there's not truly that connection. And I actually feel it here a lot more than I have in a long time. I haven't looked a human in the eyes for a while, but I still feel connected to all of you. So anyway, that's also my side rant of I'm really glad that we have this community. I think that's what's important right now. The top resources that you requested were events. So here we are. We are in an event. Awesome. We have a lot of firesides coming up for a while, Tom, till like September?
Well, next year. Till next year.
Okay, till next year. Cool. So we're set. And hopefully you guys, if you want to speak at any of these future events, or if you want to host your own, just like let us know. Hit us up in Discord, and we're more than happy to invite you to have this space as well. You also recommended online community discussions, which we have in the Discord, and you recommended funding resources. So I'm trying to keep my eye out for any grants or funding opportunities or things that are popping up If you find any, please share it with the community. That could really help. You never know if that could be a big deal for someone else. The most requested topic by far was education. So give me some hearts if you're interested in topics around education. All right, cool. What about topics around mental health? Cool, those were some of the top ones. And then the other one was social VR, which which is kind of meta at this point. Cool. All right, so we're definitely listening to all your responses. Thank you. We will be brainstorming ways to support you the ways we can. I wish we had large sums of cash and hardware we could hand out, but we are a very small team, nonprofit ourselves. So hopefully through the community building initiatives, we can help. And I wanted to leave with just one quote. I'm gonna peek under my headset here at a slide that I have. So I can see this word for word. Someone left a really cool comment. These were all anonymous. I just want to share it with you because I thought it was nicely said. It says, "This is a unique moment in history, a moment to pause and focus on developing VR towards a more humane world, putting the importance of human connection and well-being at the center." So give me some hearts if you resonate with that. I thought that was cool. I was like, okay.
Yes.
High fives to that person who submitted that. Thank you. And that kind of goes along with what Tom was sharing. And I feel like we're all really eager to work on things that mean something right now. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. That's wonderful. Thank you. Let's move to the next slide. Eva mentioned this, that we are going to have these fireside chats every 2 weeks for the time being, to see how it works. We might even go to weekly, but right now we're doing every 2 weeks. We have a great lineup of talks that are coming up. Next slide. And by the way, that'll be in alt space. We're also going to experiment with other platforms. And they will start on 1 o'clock Thursday. So it'll be 2 weeks from now as our next one. Rylan Daniels, who is a 19-year-old kid that's graduated from high school, is going to graduate from high school in LA. He's also a winner of the Next Prize last year. And Rylan is amazing. And he will talk about his experiences in VR. He writes a column for the Los Angeles Times. He runs the school VR club. He writes music for the Los Angeles Philharmonic and performs with them. And he's developing virtual worlds for neurosurgery. He is what we call the virtual native. And we are surrounded. We saw in the students in VR that's ongoing now. We see a lot of Rylan kind of people growing. And I'll be speaking at the Girls STEAM Institute. I don't know if you've heard of that before. GSI, where STEAM adds the STEM A, which is the art. And we want to definitely work on getting more young women, young girls involved in working on this technology. And that's, I've been invited to do that. So I think we have, just like the quote that Eva gave, it's a wonderful to hear this kind of outpouring. And every new member we get into the society, I get a prompt and I read that. And you do get a welcome, but I mean, I would love to be able to communicate with you directly one-on-one if we had time to do that. And I try to do the best I can with that. So look forward in 2 weeks to hearing from Rylan. And we'll all be here, hopefully, and we'll look forward to that. And then after that, we have a number of other firesides that are going to be fantastic. Next slide tells us the other big thing coming up is our World Congress in October 20th through the 24th. This is sort of juxtaposed to the educators in VR. We're doing this with the educators in VR. And this is sort of taking a look not only at the educational side, but other sides, and certainly medicine, the whole area of diversity and ethics and that kind of thing, and technology kinds of things. So I'll look forward to that coming up in October. We'll be building up to that. Next slide. How do you get involved? For those of you who are not members of the Virtual World Society, just go to our website. It's really simple, virtualworldsociety.org. And join up. It's free. And if you want to make a donation, that's wonderful too. But we really want you and your heart involved in. And generally we'll come up with the money some way to get this to happen. And as Eva says, eventually we would like to provide scholarships and provide funding to do good things in VR. And we'll get there. It may take a little while, but we'll get there. Next slide. So I want to thank you. We will keep this open for a little while. I think we can for further discussion if you want to. But I did want to finish with my sort of formal slides. And if you want to contact me, next slide, you can find me at tom@virtualworldsociety.org. And I will try to answer your inquiries or emails as best I can. So with that, thank you for coming. And I'm going to hang around. We're going to hang around for a while. If you want to, there's one last question I'd like to ask that goes along with our manifesto. Do no harm. We're playing with fire and shun violence. How many of you have had an experience in VR that wasn't so good? Where you felt that it didn't contribute, or you were injured by it, or you got sick by it, or something like that? Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's what I thought. And so we have to solve those problems. So Eva, with that, we'll finish the sort of the formal part and go to the informal part, where we'll just hang around and visit and ask more questions.